Any story that has to do with Salem's Lot, I just am all about it. It's probably how Harry Potter people feel about Harry Potter books.
Hi guys, and welcome to Stephen King Sematary Club.
Hi guys, today we are going back to Salem's Lot. We are returning to one of my favorite towns of all time, and this story is called One for the Road. Jerusalem's Lot was the first short story in this collection, and it dealt with, obviously, Salem's Lot. It was the history before the novel, and this is what happens after the novel. So we have Tukey's Bar, which is owned by Herb Tucklander, and he is in the bar during a snowstorm. It's late at night, it's after 10 p.m. January, it's cold, it's windy. He's going to close up early because there's just crazy amounts of snow coming. And he is in the bar with a customer named Booth. These are both old men. So a stranger bursts in, and his name is Gerard Lumley. He's a city man. He's not really dressed for the weather. He's got a thin coat on, not very warm gloves, nothing like that, and they can see that he has the beginnings of frostbite on him. He walked all this way when he got stuck in a snowbank with his wife and his daughter, so he left them behind with the car running so that they would be warm, and he set out to try and get help. So it's 6 miles away, and he had walked the entire way, and Herb and Booth are concerned because they know that 6 miles away is Salem's Lot, and that's where he came from, and that's not a good place to be going after dark. Once they find out that it's Salem's Lot that he came from, they kind of exchange glances, and Lumley says, quote, "You look like you saw a ghost," on page 300. And Herb replies with, "No ghosts in the lot, mister." You have Booth and Herb trying to tell this Lumley guy why it's so dangerous for them to go to Salem's Lot, and how he should be really grateful that they are willing to go with him. Because he kind of takes it for granted, like, you've got to help me kind of thing. They do tell Lumley a little bit of the history of Salem's Lot. Quote, 2 years ago, in the span of one dark October month, the lot went bad. Sometimes late at night, when there were just a few regulars drawn up around Tukey's fire, people would talk it over. Talk around it is more like the truth. You see, people in the lot started to disappear. First a few, then a few more, then a whole slew. The schools closed. The town stood empty for most of a year. Oh, a few people moved in, mostly damn fools from out of state, like this fine specimen here, drawn by the low property values, I suppose, but they didn't last. A lot of them moved out a month or two after they'd moved in. The others, well, they disappeared. Then the town burned flat. It was at the end of a long, dry fall. They figure it started up by the Marston house on the hill that overlooked Jointner Avenue, but no one knows how it started, not to this day. It burned out of control for 3 days. After that, for a time, things were better, and then they started again. They talk about the fire that burned the Marsden house down. They don't know who set it. We know that it was Ben and Mark who did it, and they kind of cleaned up the town. For a while, it sounds like they were successful in their endeavor, because remember when we left the end of Salem's Lot, it's just Mark and Ben burning the Marsden house. They set fire and are waiting for it to burn, and then their plan is to hunt vampires and kind of help things go back to normal and eradicate the vampire problem. But we have no idea that they're successful or not successful. We just know that the fire has started, and that's the first step. Well, now we know that they were indeed successful, and it lasted for a while, but apparently did not take. So I love that little nod back to Salem's Lot. I love the fact that we have totally new characters who are, a part of this, have a different perspective, don't know everything, know some different things. That's really fascinating. So the phone is dead. There's no help to be had. They need to go out in the snowstorm and help this man rescue his family. So Booth and Herb decide that they're gonna drive out there. They have a Bible and a crucifix. Quote, "Now Tukey was looking at me, and I was looking at Tukey as I stuffed my crucifix back into my shirt. I never felt so old or so scared in my life." Page 303. The three of them drive out, and Lumley sees a shape with red eyes, and he's convinced it's a deer. And the men are kind of like, yeah, It's a deer with red eyes. So they find the car and it's still running, so the gas is not quite run out, but the car is empty. And they find that the little girl's coat has been left behind. So that's not a good sign. Lumley loses it and he just runs off into the snowstorm because he sees their tracks. So he is convinced he's going to be able to find them, and he just barrels his way through the snow. And Herb and Booth chase after him. I mean, they're very, very decent men. I don't think I would have written this guy off a long time ago. So finally he stops and he sees his wife appear from a little grouping of trees, and she approaches him, beckons him near, and Booth kind of feels this lust for her. She's so pretty, and kind of like how Susan was after she died, where she was kind of a glamorous vampire, not really one of the ugly ones. Quote, "She looked up at us and grinned. And when she did, I felt my longing, my yearning turn to horror, as cold as the grave, as white and silent as bones in a shroud. Even from the rise, we could see the sullen red glare in those eyes. They were less human than a wolf's eyes. And when she grinned, you could see how long her teeth had become. She wasn't human anymore. She was a dead thing, somehow come back to life in this black, howling storm." Page 310. I love that description. I love the imagery of this man so worried about his family that he doesn't understand what has happened to his wife, and she just has this evil look, and she's kind of toying with the men who are watching her, Herb and Booth, from a distance, and she's like, "See what I'm gonna do?" And it's just a knowing look that she gives them, and it's so chilling. So they run back to the car. They're like, well, fuck this. This Lumley guy is lost, and his wife is obviously a vampire now, so there's nothing we can do about that. Tukey, he starts feeling heart pains because he's got a bad heart, and he goes over to the passenger side. Booth helps him get in, and then Booth shuts him in and walks over to the driver's side, and the little girl appears. And Booth notices that she is standing on top of the snow. Not sinking in, she is standing on top of it, and there are no tracks around. She appeals to Booth, and she's like playing the little kid card, "Please help me, mister. I'm so scared and lost and cold and blah blah blah." And he is entranced by her. He can't stop himself. He picks her up, and he is like embracing her and comforting her, and he doesn't want to. He knows what's happening, which is very, very disturbing. Quote, "She was no more than 7 years old, and she was going to be 7 for an eternity of nights." Page 311. So Booth is under her spell completely, and luckily Tukey throws the Bible out the window and smacks the girl with it, and she vanishes and disappears. So that is the gist of it. Tukey and Booth escape. They get back fine, and Booth thinks about that. Some nights after that, Tukey dies a few years later, and Booth kind of reminisces about that encounter, and he thinks about how that little girl is still out there and still claiming victims. It's such a good story. So you've got the snowstorm, you've got the man who doesn't really know about the vampires and doesn't believe the vampire story, and they were just too late, just a little bit too late for him to save his family. So you've got that also. I think it's a great short story, and it doesn't matter the order in which you would read any of this stuff, but it could be fun sometime to read Jerusalem's Lot, the short story, then read Salem's Lot, and then cap it off with One for the Road.
Have a spooky day.
Herb always sounds wrong to me. Herb.